and cream, scrapping and yelling, mixing it up, taking it out and chopping it up. It's all in the lips, the eyes and one girl singer with more swagger than all the rest. The name of Transvision Vamp was Trans, because it was all across the world. Vision, because we wanted to view the whole world. And Vamp, because, I was going to be a vamp.
Wendy James was the perfect antidote to what was going on with Kylie and Jason. And she loved that position. She loved being the critic from the sidelines.
If you thought that the rebel girl shtick was just an image, you'd be wrong. Wendy James knew she was born to sock it to us. Kind of school I went to, they didn't offer pop stardom on the curriculum. I remember being a teenager bunking in to see the Clash play. And when I saw Joe, whatever he's doing, that's what I'm going to do. In 19...
Hello, and hello out there in Broodnell land. Welcome to Broodnell Social Distancing TV with our special guest tonight, Wendy James. Probably doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give her one anyway. She was the singer in Transvision Vamp, who were one of the biggest bands in Britain in the late 80s and early 90s. She's worked with Elvis Costello on some solo stuff since then, and recently she's come back with a fourth solo album, Queen High Straight, which is out at the moment, and it's had some fantastic reviews. She's well and truly back. She's playing the Broodnell in September, all the crazy virus madness permitting, and she's here to talk to us for the next hour about her whole life in music and the new album and everything. Good evening, Wendy.
Hello, Dave. And
Where
everyone that was listening to the live stream. Hi, everyone, again. I was answering all their questions.
Are you still in the south of France?
Yeah, we're not allowed to leave.
Yeah, I figured that. So you must have been following. I should probably explain to viewers really, but you kind of divide your time, don't you, between New York, Paris, the south of France, and London at various times.
It sounds really glamorous, but it's usually just sleeping on people's couches.
Where would you call home? Is that France, or is it New York, or is it London? Where's home now?
I would say New York.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. Well, I first, back in the annals of history of Transvision Vamp, when I first went there, it was for a pre-pop art promotion, Transvision Vamp's first album. And I just remember seeing all, just like I'm sure many people who are listening have visited New York. And for some people, it just really gels. And when you see the skyscrapers and all the street signs and the traffic lights, and I don't know, there was something that felt really right about that to me. But of course, Transvision Vamp took off, and I'm raised and born in London, and that's where my success was coming from. And I had a life there, and there wasn't any time to move to New York. But when Transvision Vamp came to an end, and after the Elvis Costello record, then I had a little bit of money saved up, and I had freedom. So I just decided to pack my bags and move to America.
How was it?
In this instant, it's amazing. But I haven't had a bad day in New York ever.
Yeah, I love New York. It is one of my favorite cities in the whole world, alongside actually Paris. But New York, it's just what I loved about it when I first went there is the way that you can just keep walking, and you'll go from area to area, and it's completely different. It's almost like you've gone into a different zone, like the cartoon where the guy used to get in the wardrobe and come out the other side of the wardrobe, and he'd be in some kind of fantastic
Mr. Ben.
Mr. Ben, I think. Yeah, Mr. Ben or whatever. Yeah, I love that as a kid.
Yeah. And actually the same thing in Paris. You can walk from. The thing is, I'm a bit of now I'm slightly older than I was when I was a teenage pop star. I really enjoy history. And so the history of New York, the history of America, the Revolution, the Civil War, these things, they really fascinate me. So when or just let's keep it to just music. If it's just the Ramones and CBGB and New York Dolls and Patti Smith, then when you find yourself on the same streets that they were on, when they were in it, you do get infused with the same energy.
Yeah, which is, I think the Clash got really fired up by that. And I remember going, I think it's probably about the third time I went, being somewhere down near the Hudson River, as I remember it, and suddenly seeing the sign Lexington 125 on a street sign, and I'm thinking, wow, that's Waiting for the Man by the Velvet Underground. You know, that's where the lyric came from, and you just
And where my flat is, where my apartment is only 4 blocks away from where. So where my apartment is only 4 blocks away from where the original Andy Warhol factory was on Union Square.
Wow.
It's one street, no, 1 block away from Mark Twain, the great author of America, where he lived. It's 2 streets away from Eleanor Roosevelt. You know, everyone, just like we have blue plaques in London, I'm sure you do across the whole UK, right? There are plaques to commemorate.
Yeah.
Same thing in New York. It says so-and-so lived here. I think there's a plaque near me for the person that wrote the poem for the Statue of Liberty. Bring me your sick, your needy, your poor. Yeah. So if you land there and you're still, you know, excited about life, it does give you another big, massive injection for the future. And that's nothing to do with the rest of America. It's really not. It is unique, New York. And so once Transvision Vamp, you know, I'd walked up and down Portobello Road my whole life. And I needed something more. And I felt the future was in front of me rather than in the past. And so when I landed there, I mean, I'm the world's worst networker. I don't remember any numbers or names. And when I got there, literally, my people listening will know Tex, our keyboard player / drummer from Transvision Vamp. He was already back in New York. He'd been in New York before Transvision Vamp as the kind of a maitre d' of this hot nightclub called Nell's, which was on 14th Street, which is the place to go back in those days. And Tex had gone back there and he said, okay, you can crash on my sofa. I told you, it's not glamorous. You can crash on my sofa for a month and find somewhere to live. Because he was in what they call an unzoned district, which means you're not meant to live there. It's just warehouse and commercial.
Yeah.
So I crashed on Tex's sofa for a month and I fucking pounded the pavements and, you know, looked for somewhere to rent. And the third place that I found was a reasonable sized little apartment in Greenwich Village, in the East Village. And I took it, and that was maybe at the beginning of December. And I moved in and I had cable TV hooked up on the 23rd of December. So on the 25th of December, on Christmas Day of 2002, it was 1 year after 9/11, I was lying in bed in New York watching cable TV on Christmas Day.
That's probably the sort of thing you dream about for Christmas when you're, you know, a small child. That would probably be everything you'd ever dreamed of.
I mean, I had a bed and I had a TV and I had cable network, so everything was good.
You have led quite a remarkable life, really. I mean, you grew up originally before you went to London. You were in Sussex on the south coast, weren't you?
I was, yes.
What sort of childhood was it?
Not very rock and roll. And if I ever did, I mean, if I had ever had children, I think I would have wanted them to grow up in a city, even though it's not as, you know, nice and safe and possibly safe, quaint as green trees and nice country villages and schools. I think if I'd had kids, I would have wanted them to grow up in hard knocks of the city.
Yeah.
So where I was growing up wasn't that. It was trees and you know, school orchestras and I don't know, what can you say? Yeah, fucking the ice cream van. You know, typical countryside stuff.
Yeah.
But Brighton was a nearby town. And when I did reach my, I know what you're going to ask next. When I did started when I started entering my teenage years, then the smell of the big town started, wafting over to me, and I wanted to start investigating.
You were that little bit too young for, like the first wave of punk, weren't you? But obviously the kind of tail end of that, really seemed to capture. I mean, I know I'm going to ask you this because I asked you a couple of weeks ago, but I asked you what made you want to be in a band.
Well, literally, I mean, I suppose I would never have gone to that Clash concert had it not already been on my, interest radar and my horizon. Yeah. But I was invited or asked to come along, and I can't even remember who I went with. But we went and saw the Clash at the Brighton Centre. Oh, look, there's me wearing a Clash t-shirt.
Yeah.
Combat
Rock period t-shirt.
Yeah, and it was on their Combat Rock tour. Yeah. And my little I mean, it's a really long, big story, but I'll try and shorten it for you. But basically, when I saw Joe singing, then I just had that immediate realization that that's whatever, I wasn't at a school where they offered you rock stardom on the curriculum. So, but when I saw Joe, I didn't really know how to navigate myself from schoolgirl into that.
Yeah.
But that's what it was. That was my moment of a realization that was my future. That's
quite a leap, isn't it? From schoolgirl to, the equivalent of Joe Strummer. But actually, that's exactly what you did. You did navigate. Yes,
and so much more because, within a couple of years, Joe was one of my friends. I was friends with all of those guys. I was drinking in the same pub as them. And I'm sure loads of people who are listening now, they know one of these old stories, which is the first time Transvision Vamp did Top of the Pops. In those days, it was a pre-tape, so it wasn't live. It was taped on a Thursday. I don't know when it was. No, it was taped on a Thursday at 4:00 and maybe went out at 7:00.
Yeah.
And, because I was very West London oriented. And so by the time, it's insane, but by the time Top of the Pops went out live that night, I was back in our local pub, the famous Warwick Castle. And Joe was ordering me my first triple whiskey. I think I said it was a double whiskey in the past, but it was actually a triple and I said, he said, get the lady a whiskey American style. And I went, oh, what's American style? And he went, 3 fingers. Because that's how they measure their shots in America.
I wouldn't have had a clue what American style was either. So if anyone ever offers me an American style whiskey, I'll know I can't drive home, basically.
Yes. And I stood at the bar with Joe and with Paul Simonon that night, and we all raised a glass to my wonderful future.
And that's pretty much what happened. How easy was it to, navigate that journey? I mean, how easy was it to get a band together?
Well, we did it arse backwards in Transvision Vamp. We're very, very, it was a bit chaotic, and we got, I don't know if you'd call it luck, because there was just a lot of, we all remember when we were teenagers, right? And everyone thinks that they're just the bee's knees when they're 16 years old, and they're right about everything, and no one can tell them anything, and that's what I'm going to do, and no one can stop me. And I love that attitude, and I was no different to anyone else. And so Nick and I had met, and we'd started writing our demos. And then we went to London because we were still a little bit based in Brighton because Nick was from Brighton. And we walked into EMI Records and demanded to see Dave Ambrose, the MD, or at that time actually the head of A&R, artist and repertoire, for EMI. And he was the guy that famously signed the Sex Pistols, EMI. And so we walked in with really crazy clothes on, leather jackets, and we'd sprayed our hair silver or some nonsense. And we told the receptionist, we need to see Dave Ambrose. We're going to be the biggest band in the world. And unbelievably, she said, "Oh, I better put you through," which like never happens.
Maybe
So
it was that attitude and the fact that you walked in looking like that. You know,
yeah, like crazy
must
people.
have thought, well, they look like a proper band. I'd better let them in.
And well, it was only just myself and Nick, so a crazy duo of nut jobs off the street with silver hair. And but Dave is also, if you ever meet him, he is a genuinely talented. He has that aura around him in music business history of being one of those soothsayers that can divine talent.
Yeah.
Signed quite a few people that have gone on to be very successful. But he's a nutter. And so he saw us, fellow nutters.
As anyone who signed the Sex Pistols probably would have to be, or would be driven half nuts after signing.
Signed the Sex Pistols and then got sued by them 2 weeks later or something. But because that's the famous Sex Pistols when they're in front of Buckingham Palace, right? And they're boasting about their EMI signing. But anyway, so Dave said to us, there's something here. He put us into the demo studio of EMI Records, which was in a square in London. And when he heard, to flesh out some ideas, and when he heard those, then he said, "Yeah, I'm going to sign you, but I'm about to become managing director of MCA Universal, as opposed to head of A&R at EMI. Why don't you be my first signing over there?" So that's how come we were destined to be on EMI, but then, redestined to be on MCA Universal.
Yeah.
And poor Dave, he's like artists. He wasn't cut out for the very, very nasty business of the music business. And they actually, they fired him 18 months later.
Wow.
And we were just kind of consumed into then the MCA treadmill.
Yeah.
But for those first few months, it was like he was the new vanguard of MCA and we were the new great hope. And everyone, it was just very exciting. Oh, and you asked me how the band formed. So he signed us and then we had to go on the road, or maybe even just make a video for Revolution Baby.
Yeah.
So we got some locals from Portobello Road, which was great. It worked out. But Tex lived opposite the Warwick Castle, and he was a bit crazy looking. And Dave Parsons we met playing table football in another pub called the Earl of Lonsdale, which was Lemmy's pub.
Yeah, yeah. So it was a real part of that kind of Portobello Road, sort of Ladbroke Grove, London clashy kind of scene, really, that spawned you.
Yeah, that, and also the decade before the Clash was, of course, the Rolling Stones and the famous Donald Cammell Nick Rogue movie Performance, which if you haven't seen it, is awesome.
Yeah, amazing film.
With Mick Jagger and Anita Pallenberg and James Fox. So yeah, and not just the white history of Ladbroke Grove, but also the West Indian history. It's that and Brixton are the two main areas that after the Second World War, black families emigrated to and started, making multiracial London.
Did you go to the Carnival and things like that?
Sorry?
You go to Notting Hill Carnival and all those sort of events down there?
Well, the first few years, and then after that, you go, I'm getting out. Because my house was right on the Carnival route.
Right.
So you make a decision, either I'm staying for the Carnival or I'm going.
Yeah.
Because the barricades are up for 48 hours.
Yeah.
And there's 1 square mile of solid people. So you really can't get to the tube if you want to go out.
You get somebody knocking on the door probably and asking to borrow the electricity, I'd imagine, as well.
One of the I can't remember the name, but one of the main sound systems of there are different sound systems from the Carnival, and one of them was always situated on my corner. So your window panes rattle, and but there's some nice rice and peas, and there's a million Red Stripe cans everywhere.
Yeah. that's a real kind of cultural melting pot to be in and around, really. And I think, you know, if you look at any of your sleeves or videos or listen to the songs from that period, you get a real sense of different influences, and a lot of very sort of iconic things have gone into Transvision Vamp. You know, I mean, what were your predominant or primary musical influences, for example?
Well, I think speaking for Nick, he really wanted to meld that kind of blondie idea with Marc Bolan, where you have a nice, his master plan, if you will, was to have a charismatic blonde at the front of the Marc Bolan band, basically.
Yeah.
And for my part, you know, I educated in Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground, and you know, again, I've always been, as much as I'm so proud of English punk and love it, I've always gravitated toward the downtown New York kind of new wave punk.
Yeah.
Starting off with the New York Dolls, Suicide, Patti Smith, Television, Richard Hell, Talking Heads. You know, that's where my natural instinct is. As my baseline.
Yeah.
But for Nick, he was he really liked, you know, he's a guitarist. He likes a big riff, and no one, just like the New York Dolls do a great riff. Johnny Thunders does a great riff. So does Marc Bolan.
Yeah.
And I ended up working with James Williamson from the Iggy and Stooges, the man that did Raw Power.
Absolutely.
And when I was asking him, so you know, what were you guys into? And he said Marc Bolan.
How weird. I wouldn't have guessed that, actually.
They could not believe, because you know the Stooges had started in '68.
Yeah.
And then over across the Atlantic, Marc Bolan was having this massive super fame as a kind of sexy rock riff pop phenomenon.
Yeah.
And they just wanted to fucking keep up with Marc Bolan's riffs.
Wow.
And that's how come Raw Power, when it was doing its first sessions, before the Ashton Brothers were gone, right? Or did he rehire them? I can't remember. But Williamson had joined Iggy as the lead guitarist / writer.
Yeah.
And yes. And then they came to London, and he was telling me they lived on South Kensington, where all the, you know, Indian restaurants are. Earl's Court and South London. And they were going to Hyde Park each day. And Iggy was writing in Hyde Park on his little lyric sheet, and they just wanted to. And that's the first time they wore makeup. They were wearing makeup because Marc Bolan was so glam.
Yeah.
They went into glam. They got into British glam.
Yeah. I had no idea about that. That's fascinating in the little mini history of unknown history of the Stooges there.
Yeah, I mean, fascinating.
They were a big influence. And you mentioned Blondie as well, who I know you mentioned this to me before when we chatted last time, but Debbie Harry and people like Marilyn Monroe, they were your visual influences. That's where you took bits from to get, because you definitely had a certain look as the singer of Transvision Vamp. You know, you were very, very recognizable, and it was that kind of blonde, I don't know, what my mum would have called a blonde bombshell look, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely a blonde bombshell. I mean, when I looked at Debbie Harry, and still to this day, if you look at Marilyn Monroe, no matter how, and she's not your archetypical beauty as, you know, in terms of models or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you look at a picture of Marilyn Monroe, there's something so swoony and divine about her. There's an innocence, there's a beauty to her face that isn't calculated.
Yeah.
And you know, and there's a softness. You can see the tenderness of her soul somehow, even though she is a beautiful woman with a nice figure. There's something genuine in behind her eyes. And I think that's what makes Marilyn such the eternal pin-up, because she is untouchable, and yet she's completely accessible.
Yeah, and vulnerable as well. Very, you know, you can see that in the pictures and the films.
Whereas Debbie, Harry, and I, we're a bit more, you know, streetwise.
Was it easy to become a singer? I mean, I've never, you know, my mum would have testified. If I sang in the bath, it was a bad idea. So I can't imagine what it would be like to, you know, to front a band. I mean, it must take a lot of doing visually and vocally to carry that off. I mean, where does that come from? That kind of inner steel confidence.
I mean, I have to say it's the easiest thing in the world for me. Like, if you're a really good car mechanic, you and you open up the hood of a car, you just know your way around that engine.
Yeah.
You just know which plugs to go for. And as a singer, when I'm on stage, it's effortless. It's just this is what I do. This is what I do.
Always like that. I mean, did it come very naturally right from the beginning? The first time you got a microphone and off you went. Was it always like that?
Yeah, it's just
Wow.
and there is. I mean, of course, we rehearse and we try and we make ourselves very good at what we do, so it looks effortless.
Yeah.
But once you're on stage, there's such an ease that I actually find it one of the most relaxing places in the world to be, because I'm there with my compadres, and also I'm just in my element. You know, real life is much harder.
I've heard people say that actually, that they feel almost relaxed when they go out on stage. You know, and yet before they go on, I mean, David Bowie was famously like this. Actually, weirdly enough, David Bowie was from judging from what people who work with him have said, you know, he would get very nervous before gigs, and he's the last person you would expect that of. And Paul Weller's the same. Paul Weller throws up before going on stage, or he certainly used to do. And yet once they go on. Yeah, well, he used to literally physically throw up out of nerves and adrenaline. I mean, I can't, But then once you go on, I mean, Weller on stage is the same. He's natural. He looks like he's just been there all his life. And Bowie obviously was like that. And yet.
And Mick Jagger and anyone that's born for the stage, right? I mean, it's just, that's not a brag. It's just, that's what, you know, everyone's good at something, and we can't all be good at everything, and that has to be the thing that so when you're on stage, you've got a few feet or masses of feet if you're in a big venue, but that environment is your environment. And plus, because of music's so instinctual, and if you're working with a good team, a good bandmates, we all just, you know, my drummer watches me, I watch the guitarist, I watch the bass player, the keyboard player. We're all watching each other, and it's just like super fast, top computer brains. We're all inputting everyone's information and reacting accordingly. Yeah, and it's just, it's the best feeling.
Yeah. Well, I've never experienced it, and not many people probably have. So, but do you know your way around a car? This is the crucial question. Could you?
I can't drive. I've never tried. I'm not well suited to driving either, because even as a passenger, I'm really abusive to other drivers. Right.
So it's literally people are good at one thing. So it's almost quite reassuring that you can't also open the hood up and fix the engine as well.
No, and I'll tell you a funny thing, which makes me sound really dumb. I was living in Paris for a little while, and the washing machine broke. And the person I was with pulled up the top of the washing machine to try and fix it. And I put my hand into the mechanics and got the most massive electric shock.
Wow.
Threw me across, because I just have no idea that you shouldn't really touch the live inner workings of a washing machine.
Let that be a lesson to anyone who's watching. Never stick your hand in a washing machine's electrical bits.
Oh God, yeah, no, it's a really bad shock. It went straight through my spine to my head.
I had that when I was very young. I pulled a Scalextric kit out, and I went to pull the plug out and put my hand right round the plug, you know, sort of wrapped around it. and I got the shock of my life, literally, and it threw me right across the room. I've never forgotten it.
Yeah, electricity, you don't want to fuck with it.
No, you've got to channel it. And so, especially in your profession, when there's a lot of it about.
Yes, and people have died, right? But if the road crew and the and the monitor guys don't ground all of your microphones, you can get attached to the microphone and they have to pull you off and you die.
Yeah, it's a risky business, you know, getting up there. Well,
Yeah.
did you enjoy that period where, I mean, you were, you know, Transvision Vamp very, very quickly, really the sort of third single onwards, you became one of the biggest bands in Britain, and you were on the front covers of the music papers. You know, it seemed like most weeks in those days for a while. You know, you were ridiculously popular band. I mean, did you take to that? Did you enjoy that period?
It's just so abstract. You don't, I mean, yes, I like things that I do to be widely known, if possible, and I like them to be successful, if possible. They are already successful to me, but being in, you know, the business of putting out music, I want it to be as widely heard and as widely appreciated as possible. So when there are many magazine covers putting you on the cover, it's not so much that you sit at home looking at them going, ooh, look at me. For me, anyway, it was more like, good, we've got Uncut, good, we've got Mojo, good, we've got Q Magazine, good, we've got Enemy.
Yeah.
In terms of the words getting out. But I wasn't sitting there at home thinking, yeah, Woman of the Year. That's from Nottingham Rock City last October.
Wow. I've been there
yeah, it's their backstage mirror, which is really cool.
Wow.
So it's not like I was sitting at, I mean, the first front cover I ever had was the cover of Tatler magazine, which was shot by David Bailey, the famous British photographer.
Wow.
And then I wasn't really famous at that time. I was just a kid on Portobello Road, and they put me on the front cover, and they'd found a picture that Salvador Dali's girlfriend, Amanda Lear, she'd done a photograph where she had two vinyls covering her breasts, and so they styled me like that, and they put me on the cover of Tatler, the, you know, Society Bible or whatever. It wasn't really then, but anyway, it was just a magazine. But that was hugely exciting to me because that's your first front cover. And then when the Face magazine cover that came out, but actually before that had happened, another fashion magazine called ID had put me on their cover.
Oh, right, yeah. I used to write for ID.
Did you?
In the 90s, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, right. Well, this was
the Britpop period.
Ah, well, I was there slightly before you.
You were. Story of my life, Wendy.
But yes, so but anyway, then when the Face did it, that Face magazine blew up so much.
Yeah.
And I remember Dave, he's dead now, but Dave, the newsstand guy outside the Warwick Castle, I was slightly exposed as usual on that front cover. No, not as usual, but sometimes.
Yeah.
He thought he was doing me a favor, and he bought loads of copies up, and he plastered the whole side of the pub with, you know, these topless shots of me. And I was like, I can't. And the fashion press was like, oh, darling, this is so fabulous. And the music press was like, who is this biatch? And so I thought, I've got to get out of London. So I went to New York, and I was in those were the days. I haven't been in club class ever since, but I was in club class, and all the businessmen had copies of the Face. I was like, no. And then I arrived in New York, and all of Broadway was fly posted with the bloody Face magazine.
Oh my God!
It was just massive, funny enough, Jürgen Teller, who's now world famous super top fashion photographer, from Germany, and he's obviously photographed all the super top models till the end of the day. But his mum from Germany, that was her favorite thing that he did. And he said, it's so funny when I go home, the only photograph my mother has is the Face magazine. So anyway,
you had a fantastic reign in Transvision Vamp, including a #1 album, which at that time would have been hundreds of thousands of sales. And then it came to an end, as bands do. As the Clash did. It seemed to reach the end. The end of it. So why was that? Why did Transvision Vamp end?
Well, I think we all have a natural arc anyway. Even the Beatles, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I mean, no, actually, I'm not all, because some bands just keep going, i.e. the Rolling Stones. But a pop rock band usually has an arc.
Mm.
So that natural tendencies, natural rhythms were playing out anyway. I mean, of life and the future and the past.
Mm.
But also music was changing. Nick had become, as we entered 1991, 92, I suppose, there was the most massive East Coast movement of Public Enemy and De La Soul and black East Coast hip hop that was making really great pop music as well. Fight the Power, Public Enemy. Ooh, there I am doing Tell That Girl to Shut Up. And so for Nick, what started off, like I said, as the Marc Bolan, Debbie Harry mishmash, he was becoming more interested in Public Enemy, basically.
Right. Yeah.
And at the same time, we'd been out doing all these festivals, and I'd been listening to Bob Dylan, and we'd been playing with Elvis Costello, and I wanted to, I had the naive, still very youthful urge to be serious, to be taken more seriously. And so both of us were needing other things apart beyond how Transvision Vamp first started, which is quite natural for a band. That's the meaning of evolution. That's how you grow.
And especially in those days, bands did tend to, they ended at the right time. Nowadays, they do go on and on and on and on because nobody ever really, they realize it can be a long career. And I think in those days, like whether it was the Beatles, the Clash, or whoever it was, they would know when to pull the plug, I suppose, really. You'd have to talk to the Clash, but I think things devolved in their scene as well. With Hopper going, and then Mick, and for us, no one. I think it's worked out for the best for me that I then moved on to what was beckoning me. And here we are today, and I think that proves my point. But at the same time, through hypothetically, if we'd had a manager that had maybe said, "Listen, you guys are exhausted, you're burnt, you need some time off. You haven't stopped working for 8 years or whatever. Take a year off and see how you feel. Go and go skydiving, do whatever. Come back to the studio in a year's time." Then by that time, maybe we would have recalibrated ourselves. Yeah.
Been able to continue. But as it was, no one really gave us a guiding hand. And we did 3 tours of America and one in that final year. And we were shattered. We were exhausted. And Nick and I just kind of looked at each other, and it seems crazy now, but at the time, the only way we understood that we could get some rest was to split the band up.
Yeah.
I mean, we were just that frazzled.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how it happened. And I'm sure for the Clash and, the Beatles is another story, but these things just dissipate. Life, they just dissipate.
Tell us the story of how you worked with Elvis Costello, because it's not the average story, this.
Well, that works into what I'm saying about those last tours of America. Earlier on in the year, I don't know which year it was, but we'd 1991 or 92, we'd played a big festival in Ireland called Fela, and Elvis Costello was the headline, and I thought until recently we were the other headline but I think we were actually the support headline,
Right.
second headline. But anyway, I remember watching Elvis from the side of the stage, and like I say, you know, Nick was enamored, and as I was, and the Beastie Boys and everything, we were all getting very New York's oriented. But at the same time, I was watching Elvis and seeing him do, I think it was during his Spike album. And I remember him thinking that some of his lyrics and his melodies were so meaningful.
Yeah.
And I wanted to start expressing myself in not like Elvis, but in that direction. And so then it just happened, because as always in my life, I've never had a plan. And we were in LA, and we were staying in the same and I walked into the bar of the hotel, and I bumped into Pete Thomas, the drummer from the Attractions, Elvis Costello Attractions. And I said, kind of conspiratorially, you know, we've got a few more dates left on this tour, on this American tour, but I really don't think Transvision Vamp are going to carry on beyond the end of it. Do you think Elvis would do anything? And Pete, you know, I was obviously angling for Pete to just phone up Elvis and say, write something for Wendy James. And he said, but, you know, he made me work for it. And he said, well, why don't you write Elvis a letter? And so that evening, with a few drinks inside me, I went upstairs to my hotel bedroom, and I got out the hotel note paper, and I wrote Elvis a letter, a truthful letter, saying, you know, I think my band's going to end, and at the same time, I don't quite know how to navigate being a solo artist entirely off the bat by myself straight away. Would you help me? And I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear a thing. And then when we got back off this last US tour, I opened my front door, and, you know, legend is the truth, which is that there was a cassette on my doormat, on the inside doormat. And Elvis had not only written me a song, he had written me this whole album with his girlfriend then, who was in the Pogues, Kate O'Riordan. And so they'd written me this album, and I didn't even, you know, I just punched straight up into high gear. I booked myself another flight back to LA, a return flight, which is madness because it's like an 11-hour flight or something. Yeah. But I marched, and I got a car service from LAX to the head of Universal Records, and I walked into his private apartment, and I said, I demand to be released from my contract. I'm not going to be, you know, I'm not going to have you waste any more of my albums, you know, the indignant pop star. And he said, well, you know, we've got a bit of contract on you still. So what we'll do here, we'll do a meet you halfway, and we'll move you off the Universal imprint into Geffen, because by that time they'd bought up Geffen Records. So they flipped me over to Geffen, signed me for an enormous amount of money, which I held in my hand for, I won't tell you how much, but I held it in my hands for half an hour.
Wow.
And then I gave it to the accountant, and that's the last I saw of it. which is a shame.
It's all over. Yeah.
And they hired on all sorts of wonderful musicians, and we made that record. And in my brain, that's known as the Elvis Record, because I don't think it really represents me. But on the other hand, it's an incredibly valuable bit of my history.
Yeah, and what a thing to do, to write a whole album for somebody like that, almost unannounced. You know, I mean, he's taking the risk that you might not have liked the songs. You might have said, "Oh, I don't," you know, and then he'd be stuck with an album that he didn't, you know, that he'd written for somebody who didn't want it.
I mean, he's got a lot of use out of those songs. I think he's released all of those songs now as B-sides, and he calls them the Gwendolyn letters. And it's actually because that's the other legendary thing about that album is the Attractions, for whatever reason, none of them had spoken to each other for many, many years. And he reformed the Attractions to make my demo tape.
Wow.
And my demo tape, there's only one copy. Well, Elvis has a copy, and
Yeah.
I have a copy, but Mick Jones has my copy. So
Right.
I don't have a copy, but Mick Jones does.
Right. Blimey. What was Elvis like? I mean, did you get to know him well during that period?
No, not at all. I mean, Pete was the drummer on the album, so Pete was the kind of envoy for Elvis.
Yeah.
His spokesperson, and Elvis spoke from on high, giving his production directives.
Yeah.
No, I cannot claim to be Elvis's friend in any way.
Right.
I met him at a U2 gig at Wembley Stadium, and I met him on Lexington Avenue in New York City.
Right.
Both times were very cordial and polite, but nada.
Yeah. Weird. I mean, what an amazing thing though to do. You know, to write a whole album. And
Yeah,
I mean, you know, you've sang Nick's songs in Transvision Vamp. You've sang Elvis's songs, though. You know, they're two very different writers, but you've obviously learned from both of them. And now you've gone full circle where you're very, very involved in the music, aren't you? I mean, you write the songs, you produce, you're very, very hands-on in a way that you wouldn't have been when you were a teenager in Transvision Vamp.
Yes, and if you don't mind me saying, and I love my Transvision Vamp history, but I think the songs that I'm doing now are the best things I've ever done in my life. And I think the production skills are self-explanatory. And yeah, I know what I'm doing. I'm a good songwriter now. I'm a good producer. I'm definitely a good band leader. My musicians and I work together extremely well. It's a trust and a good work ethic, and we push ourselves hard, but we also support each other. And I wouldn't be anywhere else, you know. And I think you can just tell from the kind of reaction that Queen High Straight, but also even all of my earlier solo albums. Yeah, you see, there are some really lovely reviews.
Fantastic reviews this album. I mean, this is the fourth solo, and I think there were two albums in a band called Racing as well.
Yeah.
You know, you've made a lot of music in the last few years, but I mean, this album alone has, I think it's 20 songs on it. You're clearly very productive, Wendy.
Well, I mean, me and my fans, we'd had a lot of success with the last album, The Price of the Ticket, which saw me working with James Williamson and Lenny Kaye and Glenn Matlock.
Yeah.
But actually, just the other night, I was listening back to Racine 2, and there's some of those songs we still play live.
Yeah.
You're a Good Man's Sister, and I'm Freaking Out, and some of these songs are just so great that I swear to God, one day I'm not necessarily the greatest hits, but definitely I'm going to do a collection of all of the, and I'm also, because everyone on my social media page has been saying, get it all on vinyl again, make it available again. And I'm going to start rerunning some of the previous albums, because there have been good songs the whole time. It's just I've never been in a position to command the media attention each time. And it's just been incremental, you know, bit by bit, things get a little bit more successful and more people, you know. Mick always used to say to me, it's like the Magnificent Seven. To begin with, it's Yul Brynner walking down the road, then someone joins up, then someone joins up, until you're this Magnificent Seven. And that's what this is, right? Just every week or every day, every year, a few more people join up until one day we are one.
That's a great analogy. And hopefully we will all be one at the Broodnell in September if those gigs go ahead. Have you been given any kind of, I don't know, I mean, is there any kind of anything coming from government as to whether live music is going to be okay by then? I mean, is there anything being put out?
It's changing really rapidly, isn't it? Because I mean, we've got the Black Lives Matter protests at the moment, so that's most certainly, and good for them, that's most certainly a mass gathering. But I think I think the venues are very cautious of the social distancing rules.
Yeah.
Because for all of us doing these, whether you're in the audience or on the stage or you're at the business end of it, you know, if you can only have 50 people in the venue and you've all got to be 6 feet apart, I don't know how much of a gig that is. And we're all wearing...
Yeah.
And also from the promoter's point of view, he's going to lose so much money if you can only have 50 people in there.
Yeah.
And it's not great for me either, you know, would rather have a packed audience.
Yeah.
So I'm just, but it's changing rapidly, you know. So in other words, I've got no answer.
Yeah.
I'm talking to the promoters on a regular basis, testing the water, seeing what they think. A couple of venues have said that they're not sure that they can even be open at that time.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
but other venues are treading water at the moment. So I don't know. But
Well,
I can guarantee one thing: it's not going to be cancelled. It might be delayed again, depending on the law, and our safety, of course, your safety and mine. But it won't ever be cancelled.
Cool. You have that as an exclusive, everybody. The gig the show will go on one way or another.
It will go on, yes.
In the meantime, we have the album. You know, all 20 songs of it. Who is the Queen High Straight? And there's a great line in there that I really like. It's not easy to be an outlaw in times like these. Is that you? Is that autobiographical, or is it about somebody?
I mean, I think it has to be about me somehow. I don't sit down and think I'm going to write my biography, but you just have to follow the thread that everything that I write is coming out of me, right? And we all have our own unique life experiences, and therefore we've all formed our unique life opinions on how we've reacted to our own unique life events.
Yeah.
So even though I'm not saying, hey, I'm an outlaw, that has to be informed at some point by my own personal feelings. And also, you know, the world's getting straighter, as in groovy and straight. And, you know, less flexibility, less, you know, even the punk days were, you could be a bit wild. I don't know, but maybe that's just me getting old. Maybe I shouldn't even because if you're a 16-year-old, you're probably just as fucking crazy and wild as any other teenager in any other period. And you've got your own scene, and you think all grown-ups are dickheads, and, you know, and that's where you're at. No different to any other teenager. But maybe there was more flexibility in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, more of an underground scene. For instance, you know, in London or in any inner city, there's usually a bohemian area that you can live in, really cheap rent, you know, all kind of like-minded. You've got your scene, you've got your club, you've got your pub, you've got your friends, your mates. And you could sign on the dole, you know, and there was a bit of flexibility to being a young person and being antisocial.
Yeah.
And nowadays, just all major cities are just co-opted for kind of rich, upper middle class, hedge fund guys, you know, buying all their nice furniture at the weekend, and and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's become one big shopping mall, right? It's just become one generic.
Yeah.
If you've got money, you can live in the centre. If you haven't got money, you go more and more to the suburbs.
It's funny you say that, because when you come to the Broodnell, if you hang around, if you investigate that area around the Broodnell, it kind of is like that. It is that bohemian area, and it's cheap to live. Lots of bands either live there or form there. You know, the amount of bands and artists within about 100 yards of that venue is really quite remarkable. And it's a real pocket of that kind of thing, that underground kind of vibe, really. But it is very rare now, like you say, very rare.
And you need that, because any real estate agent will tell you how any area becomes profitable for them. It's because we, the bohemians, live there as poor, scummy little artists and renegades first, and then it becomes the hip place to live, and then they co-opt it. just like punk, just like any art form. You know, there was punk, and then EMI bought it. You know, and it's just like everything. But it's essential for life and progress and culture that there are protected areas where people can live. You know, in New York, right? You can't even afford Brooklyn any longer. You have to move to Detroit.
Yeah.
And these are all epicenters of, you know, when I mean, long before me, but let's say in the 70s, Talking Heads and everyone, they were living in massive lofts for what, 100?
Yeah, the same, yeah.
Whereas now they're just owned by, I don't know, hedge fund guys.
Well, we mentioned Outlaws, and just it flashed up on it. If anyone's wondering what this refers to, it flashed up on the screen. Kurt Cobain in the Transvision Vamp T-shirt. We are running out of time, but you should tell this story of how Kurt Cobain ended up wearing a Transvision T-shirt, and it's a, you know, one icon wearing. I mean, what does it feel like to be, you know, you're effectively, your T-shirt has been worn by another icon. It's, you know,
I know.
No unexpected, you know, meeting of cultures, really.
Well, I mean, I've got a few stories. I mean, I've got David Bowie used to come to all of our gigs.
Wow.
And I've done a gig on a boat sailing around Alcatraz in San Francisco with David Bowie in the front row.
Wow.
So I've had a couple of moments, and one of them was, Kurt Cobain was a Transvision Vamp fan. Props to him. And he wore our 1991 American Tour T-shirt. And I'd always heard mythologically that, there's footage of Kurt wearing a T-shirt, and I'd never seen it. Yeah. And then somebody about a year and a half ago sent me the GIF.
Wow.
And it was the gift of the GIF, because when I saw, and then I found the old print files from the tour T-shirt, and now I sell the Kurt shirt on my website, and which enables me and my fans to read. Is a great T-shirt. T-shirt.
Yeah. But he had pretty good taste, Kurt. He had pretty good taste.
Having Kurt model the T-shirt is a bonus.
That's pretty cool. I think having Kurt Cobain and David Bowie as your fans, it doesn't really get any cooler than that. Wendy, we could easily talk for another 4 hours. This has been absolutely brilliant. Thank you very, very much. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Do buy the album. It is terrific, and we hope we will all see each other at the Broodnell in September.
And I just want to say to my fans who are watching, my core fans, I love you with all my heart. And every single day when you leave messages, and when you buy the records, and when you listen to the album and tell me your favorites, and just everything that you do for me each day. I mean, I do sometimes say I wouldn't be here without you, but that is the truth, because I wouldn't be here without you. So thank you.
That is very lovely. Thank you very much, Wendy, and good night from Broodnell Social Distancing TV.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Coffee and cream, scrapping and yelling and mixing it up, taking it out and chopping it up. It's all in the hips.